A journey into the ADHD brain. The reason for this video is kind of personal, but I know that there's multitudes of mums and dads who has experienced the same humiliation about themselves or their child who has ADHD. There are still too many people out there who believe that ADHD is caused by bad parenting or other social influences or even bad diets. For those of you who aren't blessed with ADHD, I hope to give you some insight to ADHD and change your biases about children or adults you know with ADHD. For those of you who have been humiliated because you've been bestowed the gift of ADHD, I hope to encourage you to spread the message that our brains might not function like most people's brains, but our brains can do many magnificent things others only dream about. I am not a neurologist, but I love to read about and study the brain. My curiosity about the brain was fired up when my son was diagnosed with ADHD. I came to notice that ADHD is common in our family, and I wanted to know everything about ADHD and how ADHD brain functions. I started attending every seminar about ADHD that I could attend, and I started reading every article about ADHD and other brain disorders that I could get my hands on. I know there is still plenty to learn about this topic, just as there is plenty to explore about ADHD. Some of the best studies I read were conducted by Enigma because of the size of their research group. They used brain images of 1,713 people who had been diagnosed with ADHD and 1,529 people who had not. Participants were between 4 and 63 years old. The team of scientists looked at 7 areas of the brain and found that the volume of 5 of those regions was smaller in the brains with ADHD. There is no greater nor more complicated system than the human brain. This video will try and explain 4 of the 5 areas and why they don't function like a normal brain. The brain is divided into sections. These sections include the cerebrum, the encephalon, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Now, put on these shoes and walk a mile with me in the shoes of a person with ADHD. I hope this will change your opinion about punishing a child over and over for the same thing. I hope you realize that punishment might worsen the situation. I hope after walking this mile with me, you will be able to say, "Now I understand," and salute any person with ADHD for any single moment they can fight the neurological malfunction in their brain. I know they try their best to regulate their behavior. I invited Timothy from my imaginary world. Timothy has ADHD and seems to be in trouble most of the time. Exploring Timothy's brain while he is busy behaving awkwardly will explain his behavior. I will demonstrate Timothy's brain according to the studies conducted by Enigma. Let's see what is going on in the science lab. If we look at Richard and Jenny, it seems that the class were told to use safety glasses for their experiment. They used one simple measuring jug and a Bunsen burner to heat their experiment. Now look at Timothy. I think you are saying that face of the teacher is well deserved. Now let me explain what happened in Timothy's brain for you to decide if you can understand that Timothy was not naughty. He might have followed his own heart instead of the teacher's instructions, but he didn't mean to be naughty or disobedient. Dr. Edward Hallowell said an ADHD brain is like having a Ferrari with bicycle brakes. So what happened here? The cerebrum or cortex is responsible for a great deal of functions that we take for granted each day. One of the major functions is your most complicated thinking abilities. It will look at the situation in the class where the teacher explains a scientific experiment, and Richard and Jenny will think, "This looks very dangerous. I will do exactly what the teacher said, that I will be safe and not blow up the whole class." Timothy might hear the teacher say, Keep your safety goggles on and do exactly as I say. But before the cortex can process the teacher's commands, Timothy was already thinking, "Wow, this is super exciting. Look at these chemicals. I wonder what will happen if we put them all together. I need to have a look at all this mind-blowing science. It will be wonderful if I can one day become a great scientist and change the world with my inventions." The cortex also integrates info from all the sensory organs. For example, the safety goggles will probably not bother Jenny or Richard because the information which is sent to the brain via the senses are processed as it should be. Timothy might experience discomfort with the safety goggles because his cortex doesn't process the information correctly. Another example that we see so often with learners with ADHD is that they don't feel the temperature on their bodies. You will need to constantly tell them to wear something warm because most of the time they will walk in short sleeves even though it is winter. So the scenario, everyone was doing what they were supposed to except for Timothy. The teacher got angry, asked Timothy to pack away all the equipment, even though he might have been the only one in the class that were really amazed by the class, the one who would love to participate because he loves science. Timothy feels heartbroken because he doesn't understand why his enthusiasm got him into trouble. Timothy feels like a loser. So what happens next? The bell rings while packing away and getting ready to leave for the next class. Johnny whispers, "You loser!" Timothy, who is already upset, turns around and swears at Johnny, or even worse, punch Johnny in the face. The teacher is already mad about Timothy's behavior in class, is now furious and immediately writes Timothy up for detention. Now why was it so hard for Timothy to just ignore Johnny? Timothy knew from previous experience says that he is the one who gets into trouble most of the time. Why didn't he just walk away and control his impulses? Unfortunately, Timothy's hypothalamus and pituitary gland, which are situated inside the diencephalon, are responsible for instinctive functions and behavioral responses such as aggression. When an ADHD brain feels tension, or when the brain is upset, which was already caused inside the class, the neurotransmitter work even slower. As we have seen during the class period, the neurotransmitter didn't work properly. Now outside the class, with the frustration and tension Timothy already felt, and now Johnny puts even more sparks to the fire, the neurotransmitters shut down. As you can see, it is not going well with Timothy. When teachers understand the working of an ADHD brain, they will understand that going to school is a very tense and frustrating task for children with ADHD. Most of them hate school and would rather be learning outside the four walls they are trapped in the whole day. So how is the story unfolding? Well, next period in mathematics. Timothy loves mathematics. He loves how it ignites his mind when he has to solve difficult equations. The problem is, Timothy is too upset to use his brain to think straight. Miss Burke likes Timothy, and she knows Timothy loves mathematics. But she doesn't know how his day went up to now. Timothy came into the class and slanted into the chair. He didn't have the energy to sit up straight. Mrs. Burke was immediately on Timothy's case. "Timothy, sit up straight. You are not on your father's yacht. While you are busy moving around, why not come to do the first sum on the board for us?" Timothy walked to the front and looked at the board, but nothing made sense. He knew he saw these sums before, and he could do it in the past. But suddenly, it feels like his brain had seized. All the kids were laughing at him, or so he thought. It is not really what happened, but that is what his brain told him. and before he could stop himself, he yelled, "I hate you! You are dumb!" and ran out of the class crying. So what happened here? The balancing act. The cerebellum, also known as the little brain, because it's folded into many lobes, is below and behind the cerebrum. It's attached to the brainstem and lies above and behind the pons. As the second biggest area of the brain, it controls motor functions, the body's ability to balance, and its ability to interpret information sent to the brain by the eyes, ears, and other sensory organs. Because Timothy was already frustrated and upset from everything which happened during the day, the neurotransmitters in the cerebellum did not balance everything as it was supposed to. First, it did not tell his muscles to contract to keep his back straight in the chair. The equilibrium in his body was upset. Therefore, he was slanting in his chair. When Miss Burke, who actually liked Timothy and who is on his side, now also lectured him about his behavior, his cerebellum shut down so that no information could be properly interpreted through sensory organs. He couldn't interpret the numbers in the front of him, although he recognized them from previous lessons. His ears interpret sound in the class as laughter, even though it could have been anything other than laughter. His cortex was also down and did not control his emotions as it should have. Therefore, Timothy rushed out of the class saying things he didn't mean. Miss Burke cannot let this pass as the children might follow in his behavior. Therefore, she has to take Timothy to the principal. Timothy is now totally upset and is experiencing a meltdown, which puts his brain into fight or flight mode. Any person who experiences trauma or something really scary might go into this state, where nothing makes sense anymore, and you are responding to your situation in autopilot. Therefore, if your brain decides to fight, your body will go into overdrive and start to fight the situation. If your brain chooses flight, you might flee the situation. So if you are in the principal's office, where you don't have the option of flight, your brain only choice will be fight. The brainstem consists of the medulla, an enlarged portion of the upper spinal cord, the pons, and the midbrain. The functions of the brainstem governs include respiration, some reflexes, and the change that happens in the body during what is called the fight or flight response. With all the bad things that happened, like the insults and the things which made Timothy felt like a failure, his brainstem did not send the right impulses through to the neurons and therefore did not send the right message to the brain and senses. If you take this whole day of Timothy and rewind the tape to the beginning of the story, we can see that this whole day could have ended much better for everyone. If the chemistry teacher knew and understood ADHD, he could have prevented everything. You as teacher do not know how Timothy's day was before he entered your class. It might have been a good day for Timothy, and you can be the first teacher who do not handle the situation in the right manner, or you can be the third or fourth teacher in a row which is causing a meltdown to occur. ADHD is a disability, as we call it, an invisible disability, because no one sees the disability, but even worse, some do not acknowledge it as a disability. In this last part of the video, I want to show you why the person with an ADHD brain cannot control their behavior. Some medication do help in a way, but it is not magic wand that cures ADHD or gives you a normal life. Even with medication, these learners still need support from their teachers and peers who understand what they are going through. With the shoes that you have put on at the beginning of this video, you might now understand ADHD, and you can now help these learners with positive discipline and therefore not make them feel bad about the situation, but rather acknowledge their intentions and show them the harm that could have been done. Ask them to come up with solutions on how to warn them in advance before a bad situation arises again. In my next video, I will give you some pointers that you can incorporate in your lessons and class to help these learners. But first, back to the brain of the learner with ADHD. I am going to show you a video to explain how a normal brain functions. The messages are sent from the senses to many parts of the brain. The message is interpreted and then sent to parts where it belongs. I am not a neurologist, and therefore I am not going to get too technical. If you want to see the real working of a brain, there are many medical neurological sites where you can see videos about brain functioning. This short interpretation is just to show you the difference in a normal brain and the brain with ADHD. I referred to the neuron on the brain cell earlier, but it is very important to look at the neuron much closer, because it is the dysfunction of the neurons in the different brain areas which are responsible for ADHD symptoms. Your brain has millions, if not trillions, of brain cells, referred to as neurons. Neurons are the brain cells that conduct and produce the emotions, motion, and thought on a daily basis. These behaviors are the result of neurons communicating with other neurons electrically and chemically. In each axon terminal are sacs, known as vesicles, filled with one of 50 different chemicals called neurotransmitters. Each neurotransmitter sends a different type of message to the next neuron, which recognize the neurotransmitter with specialized receptors on the surface of the dendrite. Once these receptors have opened the lock, they drift back into the space between the neurons, where they are either destroyed by enzymes or pumped back into the original axon terminal by transporters. The problem is that the ADHD brain has too many transporters, and before the neurotransmitter can reach the dendrite, it is already sucked into the transporter. Therefore, the message do not reach the different brain areas, as in a normal brain. When you tell a normal brain to stop a certain behavior or talk about dangers in a setting, the message will go through and the person will act as expected. But if the message is not transported from the ear to the brain, it makes sense that the child with ADHD has a handicap. He heard what the teacher said, but before the message is properly executed, 20 new thoughts are already transmitted through the brain. This causes a hurdle, which made things difficult. When a person has a physical disability, you can see the hurdle, but you cannot see the hurdle in a brain. Therefore, it is called an invisible disability. Back inside the cell, the neurotransmitters are again either destroyed or returned to a vesicle, where they can be reused. Different neurotransmitters serve different functions, and they are also recycled differently. As you can see, your brain is a complex, highly organized organ that governs everything you do. Please like my video and subscribe to my channel. You can send me all your questions. I hope I can answer them all in the sequel to help you understand the life of people with invisible disabilities. It is a lonely life, where you seem normal, you might be very beautiful with no body deformations, and you look like any other person walking next to you. Everyone expects normal from you, but it's not that simple.